Okay, picking up with the second introduction from the Bantam Books paperback edition of Moby Dick. I'm including these introductions because I find them kind of informative for the listeners who are about to dip into Moby Dick for the first time or whatever. If you don't find any use for them, like I said before, you can just forward to chapter 1. And with that being said, just before I start into the introduction, I noticed something. This book also includes a few essays, criticism and context, that sort of thing, biographical notes, the analysis of Ishmael by R.E. Waters. But here's something interesting. D.H. Lawrence from Herman Melville's Moby Dick. That ought to be interesting. Maybe we'll tackle that one too. It gets, like the book itself isn't long enough with 135 chapters. I'm sorry. Is that right? Yeah, 135 chapters. Anyway, let's get on with the introduction. And that would entail, actually, one other thing, which would be, oh, we got it right here, okay. Very good, okay. Bear with me, just looking for my reading glasses. Don't give me the extra noise. Okay. Introduction. What Coleridge's Ancient Mariner said about his ill-fated voyage, we were the first that ever burst into that silent sea, might well have been said of Melville's Moby Dick. Its first readers were shocked and startled by the strange world it revealed to them. It was greeted by most English and American reviewers with respect, but also with impatience and bewilderment. More than a half of the leading periodicals ignored it. The reactions of the rest ranged from glowing praise for its lively and vigorous style to severe censures for its bombast and its unnovelistic form. The consensus of reviewers described it as a wild mixture of philosophy, blasphemy, fancy wit, exuberance, and adventure. Initially, Melville seems to have started writing it at a sea adventure in the tradition of Marty and Whitejacket. On June 27, 1850, he offered the partly completed manuscript to an English publisher, describing it as a romance of adventure, founded upon certain wild legends in the southern sperm whale fisheries, and illustrated by the author's own personal experience of 2 years and more as a harpooner. The change in his conception of the novel seems to have dated from July of the same year when he read Nathaniel Hawthorne's Moses from the Old Manse. In August, Melville met Hawthorne, and the two joined in deep kinship over problems which they profoundly and most uniquely shared. Later, Melville spent several days with Hawthorne at Lenox, and they engaged in long, sympathetic exchanges. In Hawthorne, Melville found a man who understood his most deeply suppressed intimations, a man who had written about them already, although in a manner that was so restrained and evasive that no one except perhaps Melville himself had understood their implications. He told Hawthorne what he may not have dared tell any other man. The reason the mass of men fear God and at bottom dislike him is because they rather distrust his heart and fancy him all brain like a watch. Influenced by Hawthorne, Melville produced a new and different book from the one he had begun. Published on October 1851, a year late, Moby Dick was dedicated to Hawthorne, in token of my appreciation for his genius. Hawthorne's letter to Melville about Moby Dick is lost. Melville received it about November 15th, 1851, and replied, "A sense of unspeakable security is in me this moment on account of your having understood the book. I have written a wicked book and feel spotless as a lamb." He went on to express his astonishment at Hawthorne's so exactly sharing his deepest thoughts and fully sensing what Melville had despaired of ever being able to communicate. 1 second. Not only was Moby Dick changed, it was also vastly enlarged. What Melville in June 1850 described as half of it was probably only a small quarter of the finished work. As Melville's symbols generated meanings and further meanings, the book grew in size and complexity. What began with Calvinism reached out into Zoroastrianism. What began as a symbol of nature became a symbol of God and then of man. Stylistically, Melville was influenced by Sir Thomas Browne, the 17th century writer whose prose impressed many American authors of the 19th century. Melville also drew heavily on Shakespeare, both for style and character. Pip, for example, seems to be modeled after the fool in King Lear. Ahab, defying the fire in chapter 119, recalls Lear out in the storm on the heath, challenging the gods in their ultimate injustice. In the great chapter 36, where Ahab declares his purpose to the crew, he does so in creditable Shakespearean blank verse, which Melville printed as prose. "Take off thine eye, more intolerable than fiends' glarings is a dotish stare. So thou reddenest and palest, my heart has melted thee to anger glow. But look ye, Starbuck, what is said in heat. That thing unsays itself. These are men from whom warm words are small indignity. I mean not to incense thee, let it go. Look, ye yonder Turkish cheeks of spotted tawn, living, breathing pictures painted by the sun, the pagan leopards, the unrecking and unworshipping things that live and seek and give no reasons for the torrid life they feel. The crew, man, the crew. Are they not one and all with Ahab in this matter of the whale?" The more one reads this passage, the more strikingly it reproduces the movement of the verse in Shakespeare's great tragedies, especially in King Lear. Even the slight irregularities that appear in the first 3 lines above the characteristic of Shakespeare. In the fervor and jubilation of the act of creation, Melville wrote to Deutschenick, "Can you send me about 50 fast-writing youths, with an easy style and not averse to polishing their labors?" With such a staff, he might have been able to stay abreast of his inspiration. Without it, he was bound to feel that his creature grew faster than he could control it. "God keep me from ever completing anything," he wrote when he came to understand that this condition was inevitable to a conception like his. This whole book is but a drought, nay, but a drought of a drought. Oh, time, strength, cash, and patience. A second reason for the greater size of the rewritten book is that its thesis cannot be simply or even clearly stated. It has to be rendered, to use Henry James' famous words, and the rendering involves indirections and ambiguities that carry the reader more and more deeply into the maze of truth. At the same time, what Melville had to say was in some aspects so blasphemous, so utterly shocking to the religious sensibilities of his contemporaries, that he dared not come out with it directly. On top of his proliferating symbols, he imposed a style of jocular evasion, of double and triple talk, of sly hints and impudent ironies, which made it difficult to hold him directly responsible for his most audacious statements and the impieties they express. Not only was he uneasy about speaking out directly, he was also oppressed by the realization that no artistic communication is more than a fraction of what the artist intends. His book is difficult and complex because Melville does not reduce the dilemmas of the world and of life to childish simplicities. In Moby Dick, he is dealing with matters of profound mystery. Melville himself was concerned because he was unable to express all he meant, or even to bear all of his deepest thoughts. Moby Dick is a story contrived to explore and exemplify an idea. The journey in quest of Moby Dick is an intellectual journey in quest of truth. The novel, therefore, does not take the traditional dramatic form of problem, conflict, choice, climax, and denouement. Ahab is pitted against an antagonist he does not understand. The action of the book is physically the pursuit of the white whale, but spiritually it is the story of Ahab's developing idea of what his antagonist represents and what he plans to do as his understanding of this antagonist develops. By the end of the story, Ahab has knowledge, warnings, and portents. He has the loving appeals of Pip, the noble eloquence of Starbuck, and the warmth of home to draw him away from a final confrontation he knows to be hopeless. Yet he must go on. His decision to go on is not the result of a clear-cut choice, but of his fatal compulsion. What is it? What nameless, inscrutable, unearthly thing is it? What cozening, hidden lord and master and cruel, remorseless emperor commands me that against all natural lovings and longings so keep I pushing and crowding and jamming myself on all the time? Ahab asks, and he has no answer. The idea is in command, and characterization of Ahab is somewhat baffling because his intellectual development is at cross purpose with his drive for revenge. Melville allows us to consider various possibilities in his conceptions of the nature of evil and of the universe. That the universe and God are all good, essentially spiritual. This is the transcendental view that unites God, man, and nature in mutual perfection. 2. That the universe is controlled by an omnipotent and benevolent God who permits evil in man and nature. This is Christian dualism, which carries an enormous range of dogma, interpretation, and philosophy. 3. That good and evil are independent, equally powerful principles perpetually at war for control of the universe. This is Zoroastrian or Manichaean. 4. That the universe or God is essentially evil. 5. That the universe is chaotic. 6. That the universe is orderly but godless, therefore indifferent. All or almost all critics have agreed on the special importance of the whale as a symbol. The extraordinary range of concepts and possibilities which the whale is made to suggest gives Moby Dick its great richness. At first, the whale is nature, a source of oil, meat, whalebone, and valuable spermaceti oil. It is also the largest and most powerful of all creatures, capable of sudden and incredible feats of destruction. It is impossible, as Ishmael discovers, to picture or describe the whale because it does not keep its shape unless it is in the water, and it is impossible to get close enough to it without being in the direst danger. Legends have grown up around the white whale among mariners until he has come to be thought both immortal and ubiquitous. The whalers then become seekers of an ultimate truth, which retreats farther and farther into the forbidden depths of the remotest seas. They discover that mortality, intolerable, truth, that all deep, earnest thinking is but the intrepid effort of the soul to keep the open independence of her sea, while the wildest winds of heaven and earth conspire to cast her on the treacherous slavish shore. From such tropes generated by an exploration of his great symbol, Melville constructs some of the most extraordinary sentences in American literature, sentences that derive their concreteness and vitality, their wonderful poetic qualities, directly from the powers that he releases in his symbol. Trying to get close enough to know Moby Dick, his pursuers come to the ultimate, inseparable, and incomprehensible juxtaposition of good and evil. Judge, then, to what pitches of inflamed, distracted fury the minds of his more desperate hunters were impelled when, amid the chips of chewed boats and the sinking limbs of torn comrades, they swam out of the white curds of the whale's direful wrath into the serene, exasperating sunlight that smiled on as if at a birth or bridal. From this graphic image of horror and frustration, Melville goes on to even more terrifyingly mysterious suggestions. But not yet have we solved the incantation of this whiteness, and learned why it appeals with such power to the soul, and more strange and far more portentous, why, as we have seen, it is at once the most meaning symbol of the spiritual things, nay, the very veil of the Christian's deity, and yet should be, as it was, the intensifying agent in things the most appalling to mankind. Chapter 42. In abstracting and exploring the quality of the whale, its whiteness, Melville generates the whole world's of suggestions and new meanings beyond Christianity, beyond the various religions of the East, which are invoked in search into the unknown, beyond good and evil, almost beyond the possibility of meaning, till the palsied universe lies before us a leper, and like wilful travelers in Lapland who refuse to wear colored and coloring glasses upon their eyes, so the wretched infidel gazes himself blind at the monumental white shroud that wraps all the prospect around him. And of all these things, the albino whale was the symbol. Wonder ye then at the fiery hunt. In Moby Dick, his great draught of draught, Melville went farther into the mystery of man's death-bound plight than any other American writer has done before or since. And that's the second introduction to Melville's Moby Dick. And I just want to take a peek at something quickly here that I spotted in the index earlier, and I mentioned, 654. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, the D.H. Lawrence write-up, his take on Melville. I thought that might be interesting. 54. Where are we here? Here we go. Now, do. I don't know. Sure, why don't we give this one a shot too? Yeah, this is more This looks interesting. Okay, we're going to read this. From Herman Melville's Moby Dick by D.H. Lawrence. Ooh, okay. Moby Dick, or the White Whale, a hunt, the last great hunt. For what? For Moby Dick, the huge white sperm whale, who is old, hoary, monstrous, and swims alone, who is unspeakably terrible in his wrath, having so often been attacked, and snow white. Of course he is a symbol. Of what? I doubt if even Melville knew exactly. That's the best of it. He is a warm-blooded, he is lovable, he is lonely Leviathan, not a Hobbes sort. Or is he? But he is warm-blooded and lovable. The South Sea Islanders and Polynesians and Malays who worship shark or crocodile or weave endless frigate bird distortions, why did they ever worship the whale? So big. Because the whale is not wicked, he doesn't bite. And their gods had to bite. He's not a dragon, he's a leviathan. He never coils like the Chinese dragon of the sun. He's not a serpent of the waters. He is a warm-blooded, a mammal. And hunting down. It is a great book. At first you are put off by the style. It reads like journalism. It seems spurious. You feel Melville is trying to put something over you. It won't do. And Melville really is a bit sententious, aware of himself, self-conscious, putting something over even himself. But even it's not easy to get into the swing of a piece of deep mysticism when you just set out with the story. Nobody can be more clownish, more clumsy, and sententiously in bad taste than Herman Melville, even in a great book like Moby Dick. He preaches and holds forth because he's not sure of himself, and he holds forth often so amateurishly. The artist was so much greater than the man. The man is rather a tiresome New Englander of the ethical, mystical, transcendentalist sort, Emerson, Longfellow, Hawthorne, etc., so unrelieved the solemn ass even in humor, so hopelessly au grand sérieux, you feel like saying, "Good God, what does it matter? If life is a tragedy, or a farce, or a disaster, or anything else, what do I care? Let life be what it likes. Give me a drink, that's what I want just now." For my part, life is so many things, I don't care what it is. It's not my affair to sum it up. Just now it's a cup of tea. This morning it was a wormwood and gall. Hand me the sugar. One wearies of the grand sirop. There's something false about it, and that's Melville. Oh dear, when the solemn ass brays. But he was a deep, great artist, even if he was rather a sententious man. He was a real American in that he always felt his audience in front of him. But when he ceases to be American, when he forgets all audience and gives us his sheer apprehension of the world, then he is wonderful. His book commands a stillness in the soul and awe. In his human self, Melville is almost dead. That is, he hardly reacts to human contacts anymore, or only ideally, or just for a moment. His human emotional self is almost played out. He is abstract, self-analytical, and abstracted. And he is more spellbound by the strange slidings and collidings of matter than by the things men do. In this, he is like Dana. It is the material elements he really has to do with. His drama is with them. He was a futurist long before futurism found paint. The sheer naked slidings of the elements, and the human soul experiencing it all. So often it is almost over the border psychiatry. Psychiatry. Almost spurious, yet so great. It is the same old thing as in the Americans, as in all Americans. They keep their old-fashioned ideal frock coat on and old-fashioned silk hat while they do the most impossible things. There you are. You see Melville hugged in a bed by a huge tattooed South Sea Islander and solemnly offering burnt offerings to this savage's little idol, and his ideal frock coat just hides his shirt tails and prevents us from seeing his bare posterior as he salams, while his ethical silk hat sits correctly over his brow the while. That is so typically American, doing the most impossible things without taking off their spiritual get-up. Their ideals are like armor which has rusted in, and will nevermore come off. And meanwhile in Melville, his bodily knowledge moves naked, a living quick among the stark elements. For with sheer physical vibrational sensitiveness, like a marvelous wireless station, he registers the effects of the outer world, and he records also, almost beyond pain or pleasure, the extreme transitions of the isolated, far-driven soul, the soul which is now alone without any real human contact. The first days in New Bedford introduce the only human being who really enters in the book, namely Ishmael, the eye of the book, and then the moment's heart's brother, Queequeg, the tattooed, powerful South Sea harpooner whom Melville loves as Dana loves Hope. The advent of Ishmael's bedmate is amusing and unforgettable, but later the two swear marriage in the language of the savages, for Queequeg has opened again the floodgates of love and human connection in Ishmael. As I sat there in the now lonely room, the fire burning low in that mild stage, when after its first intensity has warmed the air, it then only grows to be looked at, the evening shades and phantoms gathering round the casements and peering in upon us silent, solitary twain, I began to be sensible of strange feelings. I felt a melting in me. No more my splintered heart and maddened hand were turned against the wolfish world. This soothing savage had redeemed it. There he sat, his very indifference speaking a nature in which there lurked no civilized hypocrisies and bland deceits. Wild he was, a very sight of sights to see. Yet I began to feel myself mysteriously drawn towards him. So they smoke together and are clasped in each other's arms. The friendship is finally sealed when Ishmael offers sacrifice to Queequeg's little idol, Yojo. I was a good Christian, born and bred in the bosom of the infallible Presbyterian Church. How then could I unite with the idolater in worshipping his piece of wood? But what is worship? To do the will of God, that is worship. And what is the will of God? To do my fellow man what I would have my fellow man do to me. That is the will of God. Which sounds like Benjamin Franklin and is hopelessly bad theology. But it is real American logic. Now Queequeg is my fellow man, and what do I wish that this Queequeg should do to me? Why, unite me within my particular Presbyterian form of worship. Consequently, I must unite with him, ergo I must turn idolater. So I kindled the shavings, helped prop up the innocent little idol, offered him burnt biscuit with Queequeg, salaamed for him twice or thrice, kissed his nose, and that done, we undressed and went to bed, at peace with our own consciousness and all the world. But we did not go to sleep without some little chat. How it is, I know not, But there is no place like bed for confidential disclosures between friends. Man and wife, they say, open the very bottom of their souls to each other, and some old couples often lie and chat over old times till nearly morning. Thus, then, lay I and Queequeg a cozy, loving pair. You would think this relation with Queequeg meant something to Ishmael, but no, Queequeg is forgotten like yesterday's newspaper. Human things are only momentary excitements or amusements to the American Ishmael. Ishmael the hunted, but much more Ishmael the hunter. What's a Queequeg? What's a wife? The white whale must be hunted down. Queequeg must be just known, then dropped into oblivion. And what in the name of fortune is the white whale? Elsewhere, Ishmael says he loved Queequeg's eyes, large deep eyes, fiery black and bold, no doubt like Poe. He wanted to get the clue to them. That was all. The two men go over from New Bedford to Nantucket, and there sign on to the Quaker whaling ship, the Pequod. It is all strangely fantastic, phantasmagoric, the voyage of the soul, yet curiously a real whaling voyage too. We pass on into the midst of the sea with this strange ship and its incredible crew. The Argonauts were mild lambs in comparison, and Ulysses went defeating the Circes and overcoming the wicked hussies of the Isles. But the Pequod's crew is a collection of maniacs fanatically hunting down a lonely, harmless white whale. As a soul history, it makes one angry. As a sea yarn, it is marvelous. There is always something a bit over the mark in sea yarns. Should be. Then again, the masking up of actual seamen's experience with sonorous mysticism sometimes gets on one's nerves. And again, as a revelation of destiny, the book is too deep even for sorrow, profound beyond feeling. You are some time before you are allowed to see the Captain Ahab, the mysterious Quaker. Oh, it is a God-fearing Quaker ship. Ahab the captain of the soul. I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul. Ahab. O captain, my captain, our fearful trip is done. The gaunt Ahab, Quaker, mysterious person, only shows himself after some days at sea. There's a secret about him. What? Oh, he's a portentous person. He stumps about on an ivory stump made from sea ivory. Moby Dick, the great white whale, tore off Ahab's leg at the knee when Ahab was attacking him. Quite right, too. Should have torn off both his legs and a bit more besides. But Ahab doesn't think so. Ahab is now a monomaniac. Moby Dick is a monomania. Moby Dick must die, or Ahab can't live any longer. Ahab is atheist by this. All right, this Pequod ship, the American Soul, has 3 mates. Number 1, Starbuck, Quaker, Nantucketer, a good, responsible man of reason, forethought, intrepidity, what is called a dependable man. At the bottom, afraid. 2, Stubb, fearless as fire and as mechanical. Insist on being reckless and jolly on every occasion. Must be afraid too, really. Flask, stubborn, obstinate, without imagination. To him, the wondrous whale was but a species of magnified mouse or water rat. There you have them, a maniac captain and his 3 mates, 3 splendid seamen, admirable whalemen, first-class men at their job. America. It is rather like Mr. Wilson and his admirable, efficient crew at the Peace Conference, except that none of the Pequoders took their wives along. A maniac captain of the soul and 3 and eminently practical mates. America. Then such a crew, renegades, castaways, cannibals, Ishmael, Quakers. America. 3 giant harpooners to spare the great white whale. 1. Queequeg, the South Sea Islander, all tattooed, big and powerful. 2. Tashtego, the red Indian of the seacoast where the Indian meets the sea. 3. Dagu, the huge black Negro. There you have them, 3 savage races under the American flag. The maniac captain and their great keen harpoons ready to spare the white whale. And only after many days at sea does Ahab's own boat crew appear on deck. Strange, silent, secret, black-garbed Malays, fire-worshipping Parsees. These are to man Ahab's boat when it leaps in pursuit of that whale. What do you think of the ship Pequod, the ship of the soul of an American? Many races, many people, many nations under the stars and stripes, beaten with many stripes, seeing stars sometimes, and in a mad ship, under a mad captain, in a mad fanatic's hunt. For what? For Moby Dick, the great white whale, but splendidly handled. 3 splendid mates. The whole thing practical, eminently practical in its working. American industry. And all this practicality in the service of a mad, mad chase. Melville manages to keep a real whaling ship on a real cruise, in spite of all fantastics. A wonderful, wonderful voyage, and a beauty that is so surpassing only because of the author's awful flounderings in mystical waters. He wanted to get metaphysically deep, and he got deeper than metaphysics. It is a surpassingly beautiful book, with an awful meaning and bad jolts. The fight with the whale is too wonderful and too awful to be quoted apart from the book. It lasted 3 days. The fearful sight on the 3rd day of the torn body of the Parsee harpooner, lost on the previous day, now seen lashed on the flanks of the white whale by the tangle of harpoon lines and a mystic dream horror. The awful and infuriated whale turns upon the ship, symbol of this civilized world of ours. He smites her with a fearful shock, and a few minutes later, from the last of the fighting whaleboats comes the cry, "The ship! Great God, where is the ship?" Soon they, through him, bewildering mediums, saw her sidelong fading phantom as in the gaseous Fata Morgana. Only the uppermost mast out of the water, while fixed by infatuation or fidelity or fate to their own lofty perches. The pagan harpooners still maintain their sinking lookouts on the sea. And now concentric circles seize the lone boat itself, and all its crew, and each floating oar, and every lance pole and spinning, animate and inanimate, all round and round in one vortex, carried the smallest chip of the Pequod out of sight. The bird of heaven, the eagle, St. John's bird, the red Indian bird, the American, goes down with the ship, nailed by Tashtego's hammer, the hammer of the American Indian, the eagle of the spirit, sunk. Now small fowls flew screaming over the yet yawning gulf. A sullen white surf beat against its steep sides, then all collapsed, and the great shroud of the sea rolled on as it rolled 5,000 years ago. So ends one of the strangest and most wonderful books in the world, closing up its mystery and its tortured symbolism. It is an epic of the sea, such as no man has equaled, and it is a book of esoteric symbolism, of profound significance, and of considerable tiresomeness. But it is a great book, a very great book, the greatest book of the sea ever written. It moves awe in the soul, the terrible fatality, fatality, doom, 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 doom. Something seems to whisper it in very dark trees of America. Doom. Doom of what? Doom of our white day. We are doomed. Doomed. And the doom is in America. The doom of our white day. Ah, well, if my day is doomed, and I am doomed with my day, it is something greater than I which dooms me. So I accept my doom as a sign of the greatness which is more than I am. Melville knew. He knew his race was doomed, his white soul doomed, his great white epoch doomed, himself doomed, the idealist doomed, the spirit doomed, the reversion not so much bound to any heaven ahead as rushing from all havens astern. That great horror of ours, it is our civilization rushing from all havens astern. The last ghastly hunt, the white whale. What then is Moby Dick? He is the deepest blood being of the white race. He is our deepest blood nature. And he is hunted, hunted, hunted by the maniacal fanaticism of our white mental consciousness. We want to hunt him down, to subject him to our will. And in this maniacal conscious hunt of ourselves, we get dark races and pale to help us, red, yellow, and black, east and west, Quaker and fire worshipper. We get them all to help us in this ghastly maniacal hunt, which is our doom and our suicide. The last phallic being of the white man, hunted into the death of upper consciousness and the ideal will. Our blood self-subjected to our will. Our blood consciousness sapped by a parasitic mental or ideal consciousness. Hot-blooded seaborn Moby Dick, hunted by monomaniacs of the idea. Oh God, what next, when the Pequod has sunk? She sank in the war, and we were all flotsam. Now, what next? Who knows? Quien sabe? Quien sabe, Signor? Quien sabe, Signor? Neither Spanish nor Saxon America has any answer. The Pequod went down, and the Pequod was the ship of the white American soul. She sank, taking with her Negro and Indian and Polynesian, Asiatic and Quaker, and good business-like Yankees and Ishmael. She sank, all the lot of them. Boom, as Vacol Lindsay would say. To use the words of Jesus, it is finished. Consummatum est. But Moby Dick was first published in 1851. If the great white whale sank the ship of the great white soul in 1851, what's been happening ever since? Post-mortem effects presumably, because in the first century, Jesus was Cetus, the whale, and the Christians were the little fishes. Jesus, the Redeemer, was Cetus, Leviathan, and all the Christians, all his little fishes. And that wraps up D.H. Lawrence's take on Melville. Some things in there you can't tell. I mean, I think he recognizes it as a great work of art. Makes that clear, but at the same time says it's tiresome. But it seems like a lot of his, I don't know, not so favorable criticisms come from a difference between Catholicism and the Protestants, and it seemed to be an issue that was kept under the heat plate for Lawrence at that time. As it was for a lot of up and coming writers of his day, who nonetheless converted to Catholicism because of these things. I've never really, looked into it that deeply, and I always, I find the issue of conversion a troublesome one in that, while people just simply get sick of things and they want to change, Protestants converting back to Catholicism and I it appeals to me about as much as the fucking Beatles to the Maharishi or Mary Barber or whatever, whatever, man. Don't really care about that. But he does go as far as to say, although the book's great, it's often tiresome. But he accurately depicts it as dark. Like, I mean, it's not an uplifting, loving life sort of thing. It's an observance, if anything. It's a vision. But that was, D.H. Lawrence is a great writer, and I'll have to get into more of that. I've read From the Rainbow thus far, but not into. I haven't gotten into some of the books he's more known for. But this is about Melville's book, so thanks for sitting in and listening to the introductions. Hope you find them helpful. And I guess the next step would be to head into the book. But you know what? I'm kind of tempted to head into some more of these mini essays on Melville and the white whale. But we'll have to see. Anyway, the click is all up to you. So I don't know. Hopefully someone's getting something out of it and enjoying this presentation. I do this for pleasure myself. I mean, that's what I get out of it. And if I can share some of it and someone appreciates that, that's fine too. Thanks for sitting in.